All right, everybody, welcome to the EVOG podcast. I'm Adam from Adam's Everything EV, but our star, as always, is Brian G., the EVOG. And today we have a ton of topics to get into, as well as a special guest. Brian, welcome back.
Yeah, Adam, thanks. This has been long overdue, man. Been distracted a little bit here over the last few months, but excited to get back into it here today. And great to meet you, Tony. I've seen your collabs with Adam, so happy to have you here on our podcast.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to talking to you and Adam.
The topic of the moment, obviously, we've had a lot of action here. This time of year is when stuff like for the year gets announced. And I don't think there's anything bigger this year, or there will be anything bigger than the announcement of the Rivian R2. And that's why you're here. Tony, I just kind of want to swing it over to you. What is your intention with the Rivian R2?
It's actually to come home. And what I mean by that is I was in the Fisker debacle, like the two of you who I followed, and I just need to find a way home to a tech-forward car.
Okay, and then let's talk about really briefly, for those who don't know, what do you currently drive right now?
So currently I have a Honda Prologue Touring Edition, which was the only one around at the time. And it's doing well. It's got 25,000 miles on it now.
And then I actually am kind of the odd man out here. Brian is actually going to have to be our resident expert on Rivian. Brian, won't you tell him what you drive just to remind everybody?
We've got the 23 Rivian R1T Quad, one of the launch edition pickups, and it's the best EV I've ever owned.
And we have actually much more to talk about that later in the episode. But Tony, you have done, I would say, a fantastic deep dive into the shopping experience when it comes to buying an EV. And you've sent us a spreadsheet, which I might flash onto the screen here, but it is a song and a dance. First of all, let me know what vehicles you are shopping or cross-shopping right now.
So if you remember, Adam, when we talked at our 6-month review, I talked about the Polestar 3 because that was the hottest thing. It was being shown on ice and all that stuff. And that sounded good, and I was keeping an eye on that. And then the other is the new BMW iX3 and the Volvo EX60. Not the cross country, but just the regular.
And then just for clarification, there are 3 trims of the Volvo EX60. Are you after the 400-mile trim, or are you after the next step down, the P10?
I think I was looking at it was the P10. Yeah.
Okay. We have every stat known to man and even some stats that are unknown on this chart. Let me know what specific things about the Rivian R2 are kind of winning right now, because you said right now your goal is to bring the Rivian R2 home. It's tech forward. Other than that, what are the main reasons why you want to go with the Rivian right now?
Probably a big one is the cargo compared to what the Prologue has. You've got 5 cubic foot in the front, additional space. You've already got I think 3 or 4 cubic feet more just from the second row. Then the charging port being NACS and on the driver's rear side. Right now, I only have heated front seats, no rear seats, and the rear seat rides like a piece of cardboard.
Okay, Prologue?
Yeah, nobody likes it in the back there. And then, of course, the camera systems.
Brian, you have also done some shopping recently and looking around. Your wife is looking for a vehicle. With these 3 cars in mind, what is your take right now?
Like you guys, I'm excited about the R2. It's the biggest launch that we're going to have this year. And I don't know that there's anything else coming in the rest of this year that's going to supplant this. Maybe the second iteration of the R2 towards the end of the year. But like you, Tony, I'm pretty excited about the Volvo, especially the cross country. There's just something about the cross countries going back to older models that I've always liked. The BMW as well, although that one might be a little too bougie for me.
Okay.
I'm with you on that.
But I'm really looking forward to seeing the R2 in person. I mean, it looks so much like the R1. And I recently took the R1T in for service. I had them upgrade my tonneau cover from a manual tonneau cover that I had put on to their new Gen 3 power tonneau. And while it was in there, they gave me the R1S as a loaner, and the R1T just drives so much better, right, than the R1S. And so I want to see the R2 in person. I certainly want to see what they're going to charge for it, right? Because I think there's the potential for the Volvo to have a better value proposition given the upper end of its range. This is a form factor that I know will do extremely well, not just here in North America, but globally, right? That compact SUV is a form factor, just look at Model Y, right? That has global appeal. And so I'm ready to see the gloves come off and there'll be a ton of competition here. And a lot of that will be determined by how Rivian prices this thing.
I 100% agree. I think that price is something we should probably talk about next. If you're thinking about a Volvo EX60 cross country, are you looking at the P12, Brian, on that as well? The 400 mile or whatever the equivalent would be in that trim?
Not necessarily. I think the P10 is probably the position to be in if you're looking for value.
Well, let's let the viewers know exactly why, because there are a lot of people that think 400 miles of range is a very necessary statistic. Brian, have you found that? I know you actually have a vehicle that has almost a 400-mile range. Have you found that to be true? And what advantages, disadvantages are there? And do you think the use case for a vehicle like that is common or necessary for this segment?
Yeah, that's a great point that you make there, Adam. And I pulled out my calculator, right? If a vehicle has 400 miles of range, right? We'll just deal with ideal conditions here. And you're driving consistently at 75 miles an hour. That's 5 hours and 15 minutes. And I don't know about you guys, but my bladder cannot withstand, nearly half of that much range. So I know that people feel like they need to have the utmost when it comes to range. But I think when you look at it through that type of a lens, you realize that you really don't need that. The other thing is that vehicle, and this is the other comparison beyond price that I think is going to be part of the blows that get thrown in this battle. It's on an 800 volt architecture, if I remember correctly, which means on the right chargers, it's going to charge significantly faster than that R2. So you're looking at about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so to add 200 plus miles of range, right? Okay. So the experience there is you get to your charging location just off your route, you plug in, you go use the bathroom, maybe you grab something to drink, and per usual, and you guys can attest to this, right? The vehicle's done charging before you're ready to go.
So when I look at range, I have a specific use case right this moment, right? And that I talked to you a little bit off camera was my daughter goes to Randolph-Macon College, which is 255 miles from my house. Now, that's about probably 4.5 hours if I go straight down 95 and don't hit a ton of traffic. But even so, after an hour, I'm going to want to get out. But my goal is I just want to reach that 255 miles. So if it has 300 miles, give or take, because we know it's not always exactly the 300, that's good enough for me. And I get hungry, we plan around it. And I can tell you, I stop in Maryland and I forget where along because we take 301 to go down there sometimes and go past Annapolis. But there's a Wawa. And at that Wawa, I charge at the supercharger, go in, I come out, and I'm maybe sitting for 5 minutes before I can get back on the road. And that's usually 20 to 80 or 25 to 80.
Yeah, the GMs really like the 20 to 80. That's kind of the standard there. And that's really what the navigation systems are telling you to do. My take on range is we are obsessed with it for absolutely no reason. I have a 227 miles at 100% EV, and I haven't had any issues with it. I've taken it on trips. I drove my buddy to the airport at 75 miles an hour, set the cruise. I was losing 1% per mile. It was so cold, and I was going fast, and the battery wasn't warm, but I still made it. And for me, it's a really tough argument to say you need 400 miles. I used some AI the other day just out of curiosity. What is the furthest distance, and this is by road driving, between any 2 points in the United States? And it's 220 miles. That is the absolute furthest you can get from an EV charger that's a fast charger that you can plug into and charge quickly in the United States. East of the Mississippi, it's about 200 miles. So this 400-mile range, I I understand why people want it. And maybe you run errands all day long, or you drive Uber or things like that. But at the end of the day, I think for the regular person, it's just not a thing. So I agree with Brian. And obviously, Tony, you said also you were looking at the P10. I think the P10 is the sweet spot for that Volvo. And at that point, let's talk price. Brian, the P10 cross country, what do you think that price is going to be?
So it'll be somewhere between 60 and 70 is what I'm thinking for the P10. Probably right in the middle is where I think it'll land. And you and I have talked about this. I think the R2, at least the launch edition, will be right there as well.
Tony, what are your thoughts?
So for the P10, I'm thinking I agree with Brian on that with where the price is. With the R2, it's interesting. I think it's going to be in and around the 62 to 63 for the launch edition. And here's an interesting point, if I may, is, I watched all the different videos that came out and, just got my notes. My thing was that Doug DeMuro did he did his This Is Car Pods or something like that. And he said he got to see the pricing, which he can't reveal, but the price is quite compelling. Now, was that hype? I don't know, but
I do know that Doug DeMuro got $38 million from Cars and Bids, but that might be beside the point.
Yeah,
he
but
also owns a Ford
inside.
GT and a Lamborghini.
Countach.
A Countach. But so I have also heard from others, the price will be compelling. I did a survey. I asked, what will the new R2 be priced at? Last time I checked, it was over 200 people had chimed in. 50% of people, now I didn't say what trim. Now we're obviously referring to the launch edition, but 50% of people said less than $60,000 was going to be the price point for the R2. And then about 20% said over $68,000. So launch edition R2, Brian, what's your number?
So my original number was right at 60, 59,995. After talking through that with you and understanding that obviously we're dealing with a situation with pent-up demand and limited supply, right? Because they're only producing it on the line in normal. So there's very real limits in terms of how many they can produce until they get Georgia going. So I think because of that economic situation, supply and demand, I think it'll be somewhere between 60 and 65 is the number. So in the survey, I selected 62.
62.
As I did.
Okay, so my thought is this. They only need to make this thing cheaper than the R1S. That's it. That's number one. Number two, the guidance for 2026, this is total deliveries from Rivian, the company, is 62 to 67,000 units. In 2025, they sold 42,000 R1 series. That's either, and this is my opinion, that's either
that included the RDVs as well, right? The vans?
Yes. So that's total guidance, right? So in my opinion, number one, R2 sales are going to eat into R1 sales on year one, because they are literally offering it to R1 owners first, right? If you have a Rivian account and you buy the R2 with the same Rivian account, your R1 series ownership will bump you ahead of everyone who doesn't have one. These people are not averse to a high price. That's number one. And this guidance thing for me is the biggest number two. If I had to guess, I'd say 30,000 is the absolute maximum they're going to sell. And just to know how severe the demand really is, the Honda Prologue sold 40,000 units in 2025. The Honda Prologue, all right? And pricing-wise, I mean, obviously we know that the leases were nuts.
We're practically giving them away.
But at the same time, the actual sticker price of this car, and you can say a lease is cheap, but at the end of the day, those buyouts were insane. The buyouts on the leases for the Prologue are $25,000, $26,000, which is way more than they're going to be worth. In fact, some of them were closer to 30. So people were saying, hey, I want to just do this for 2 years, but they know they have a vehicle they have to get rid of in 2 years. My opinion is that this thing is going to sell for $80,000 on Cars and Bids, no matter what. The first rip of these is going to be employees saying, you know what, sign me up. I'm going to make 10 grand. Why wouldn't Rivian want to put as much of that money in their pocket as possible? My analogy is I don't buy Nikes anymore because you can't. If you want the nicest Nike, you have to buy them secondhand for $400 from some TikTok influencer. And I think that's going to be the case with the R2. They don't have enough. They can't make enough. Like Brian said, they are strategically limited right now. And they don't physically have enough capability to build what the demand is going to ask for. And it's a launch edition. So here's how and this is how you wiggle the price. And Brian, I think you mentioned this to me when we were discussing it, is maybe adding features. Do you think that may be something they do?
So
not charging for them?
I do think with the launch edition, there'll be they have to, right? Because they have to justify the premium of the 45K, right? So, and people are going to pay a premium to be special and first in line and so on. So I think there'll be some, unique add-ons, if you will, that are included in the premium price.
Otherwise,
did
why
you
get
have-
the launch edition, right? If you don't give them something.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how long did you have connectivity in that Rivian for free, Brian?
I don't know that it lasted a year. It might have, maybe a year and a half. But
Okay.
I see where you're going with that. And that was another point I was going to make, right? Rivian's under a tremendous amount of pressure to get to profitability, right? Particularly with this new R2 platform. And profitability comes with scale. And as we just talked about, they are literally going to be limited in terms of how far they can scale production on that line in normal until they can get Georgia online. And so I think for this year, 2026, and maybe even well into 2027, until they can get that Georgia plant cranking, we're going to be seeing premium prices for the R2. I think the only thing that can really drive a different outcome there is just how competitive something like the Volvo EX60 cross country and other models are, right? Because those will have more range, faster charging, and hopefully a pretty competitive price. And that'll kind of force, hopefully, Rivian's hand, but they have such a huge advantage in terms of tech forward software prowess. That's going to give them an advantage.
This is the electric Range Rover, is it not? The R1 series is the electric Range Rover. I mean, if you want, for some reason, Range Rover has decided just to let them have it. And, there is no competition here. It's the best-selling luxury SUV in California, not the best-selling electric. The best-selling luxury SUVs, which is where the Range Rover lands. So in my opinion, this is the Land Rover Discovery for the electric landscape. And what was the difference between the Range Rover and the Land Rover Discovery? It put Range Rover back into profitability. It kept them alive. That's where the units were. You didn't see Ranges driving around all the time. I mean, depending on the neighborhood. But you do see Land Rovers everywhere, because at the time that they were putting those out, or early to mid 2000s. Tony, what is your make or break point? When will you say the Rivian R2 is too expensive? What is that number?
I'm giving a realistic look at this. So knowing that there's folks like Brian and others that are R1 owners and have in front, plus the employees and stuff, I'm of the 70,000 that have, signed up and reserved. I believe I'm at like 68,999, somewhere around there, not to be precise. And, I don't think I'll see a launch edition. But if people keep going, you know what? I want to wait for the LiDAR. I want to wait for that Gen 3 and the new stuff. Then I might get a chance to bump up. Now, get back to your question. I think probably 65, because then I've still got $1,900 destination charge plus the sales tax and PA of 6% and all that stuff added on. Now I'm close to what I paid that first time.
65 is a $70,000 walk away. Taxes, fees, title, registration.
Yeah.
Once you get your papers in order, that's a $70,000 walk away.
Tony, if you do get the opportunity, because I can tell you right now, many of us already in the R1 community, because we know what's coming with Gen 3, I don't want the launch edition. I want to wait for LiDAR and all the...
That's a great point. That is a great point.
If you do get the opportunity to move up in line, take it, or do you want to wait for Gen 3?
No.
That price point.
That's a great question. And I was actually going to lead there was I am actually willing to go to the launch edition. And the reason being is right now, the Prologue doesn't have anything but adaptive cruise control. I don't have anything that's FSD-like.
No lane handling.
No. Well, no, it's got the button, but it doesn't really keep it.
Ping pong,
exactly.
Ping pong.
Yes, I have ping pong. So no. So it's got all these other features that I don't already have. And to me, when you get your LiDAR version, Gen 3, that's all feeding down to the Gen 2 vehicles anyway, right? I might not have all the latest tech, but say 5 years from now, I'm like, great, I'm going to give this to my daughter or trade it in. And I'm going to get the Gen 3. I'll have a Gen 3 or Gen 4 version by that point. So that's the thinking in my head.
Brian, what does a $45,000 Rivian R2 look like?
A long way away, first of all. right? That's going to come out of Georgia, and Georgia will have to be online for a little bit before that comes. But we're talking probably single motor, rear drive, decontented, but I don't know that there's a lot of decontenting that they can do, right? A lot of what they'll do will be software limited. It won't have as many drive modes, right? A lot of the decontenting, like I said, is going to be primarily in software, but they may be able to dial back the seating surfaces, right? And go to something a little less expensive. Outside of that, maybe not include the rear hatch window that goes up and down, right? Little things like that. But outside of that, going to a smaller wheel, right?
Tony, your thoughts?
Yeah, no. So I don't know that they'll go down in the seats. And I think they want to keep that because they want you to feel, like you're in a premium. But I do think a lot of, the modes and stuff that you would have on the regular, launch edition or performance is going to be limited. And it's like, okay, buy, and that leads me to, I would purchase the $2,500 outright personally.
Yeah. The big thing is going to be the battery size, right?
Yeah.
They're going to shrink the battery and shrink the range. So I'm thinking the 45K option will probably have a max range of 260 miles. Battery chemistry is also something that will be in play at that point.
Please believe it.
The performance of their LFP in the R1 has not been great, right? So I don't know that I'll be lining up to be at the front of that line for a 45K option.
Okay. So my 45K Rivian R2 is rear drive, absolutely poor stereo system. If there's any plugs other than USB-C, you don't get them. The frunk is manual. The rear door is manual. The window doesn't roll. And I do think it's LFP if they go with a different supplier. Goshen Systems, Gotion, is the Chinese company that builds the LFP. But I do think that's a thing. You're going to limit, it'll be 200 kilowatt charging maximum. Like, for example, if you go CATL, it would be 200 kilowatt charging maximum, and it would be 240, 250 miles of range. Everything there on that, I mean, you know me, I bought the the Fisker Ocean where you turn the stereo all the way up and you're just like, man, that's halfway. So I had the most decontented Fisker Ocean. I would be totally happy with a $45,000 R2, except for the drivetrain, because I am sure it will be single motor. For reference, the new Toyota CHR, which is the little tiny Toyota, is $42,000. Now it's all-wheel drive, but for $45,000 Rivian, there's no way that has dual motor, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, how does that even fit the brand ethos, right? It's all about adventure, right? I've never even thought about going off-roading until I owned a Rivian. So that's part of their brand ethos. And so if you're going to bring a decontented 45K R2 to the market and it's only rear wheel drive, it would not surprise me if that model never actually comes, or it takes a really long time. I mean, like 28.
That's what I've heard.
Before it gets here.
Marketing strategy. Those are the two reasons why you make a $45,000 R2. You walk in, hey guys, we have free samples. It doesn't even match the brand anymore.
There might be even more pent-up demand for R3, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to run into a scenario where R3 is going to cannibalize the R2 $45,000 model, right? I'd rather go get the R3, right? And pay $50K instead of $45 for a decently spec'd one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of $50K, the new Toyotas are out. I don't know if you guys have seen these. The Woodland is out. The CHR is out. They obviously have the BZ for 26, and the Highlander has been seen and teased, but we don't know a lot of the statistics on it. Tony, before you go, have you seen any of those and care to share your thoughts?
I did see the little bit on the Highlander, and I think it's good that they kept the name, but we'll see where that leads. I haven't seen anything about the BZ or anything.
Toyota now has more EV models than every other brand except GM. Brian, did you know that?
Better late than never. They're in the game. I can't get over the fact that they're this late and it doesn't have a front trunk. And these are long-nosed vehicles where the utility of a frunk, it's almost like an own goal, right? You've had 13 years from Model S launch to be able to see that you can package things in a way to give the customer more value. I don't know why they didn't do that. And especially with the Woodland, I don't know why they didn't do a better job there. The other thing is the fact that they still don't have route planning.
Shocker. That's no longer correct. In fact,
So
they have
you have route planning?
they have the best route planning you could possibly ever get. Apple CarPlay integrated Apple Maps EV route planning.
So does that tie into your vehicle state of charge in terms of calculating what you're going to get there at and how long you need to charge? And
All the way into the OBD.
okay, because I've not seen them be able to deliver on that.
Have you seen the CarPlay system with Ford?
No.
Yeah, so Ford offers both the Lightning and the Mach-E offers Apple CarPlay. The Mach-E screen and the Lightning screens are both very large. They're not oriented correctly, but they're large, and all of the route planning is integrated directly into your Apple Maps from your wireless CarPlay. So it tells you how to go, where to go. You can select your chargers, you can route plan. It's all directly into your phone. Now, the funny thing they did is they did not do it to the Subarus. So all of the Subarus are still completely without. So Brian, your point is still valid for almost half the models. And this is retroactive. So all 2023 and up Toyota models now have full route planning capability using Apple Maps, which you cannot get unless you own a Toyota or you own a Ford.
So for folks who already have these vehicles and they're seeing this via an OTA,
Oh, there's no such thing as OTA.
so how is it retroactive?
All you got to do is take it to the dealer.
When you're in for
And
service.
trust me, I have one of these. You can't not take it to the dealer. I've got right now on my Solterra, it says maintenance required soon. And the only way to get me to get that to go away is for me to hop in the vehicle and drive 125 miles to Indiana, Pennsylvania, and have them plug it in and tell it to go away. So
Well, if they're doing this for the Toyota models, I think it's probably just a matter of time before they do it for the Solterras. It's the same vehicle.
And here's the other thing. The BZ Woodland, this is a loaded version. It has a panoramic roof racks. The highest size wheel you can get on this is 18-inch. And there are 2 tire sizes instead. You can get all-terrain or all-season tires, but both of the options are an 18-inch wheel, so it's going to be a super comfortable ride. I have one. They're very comfortable ride. It has all the route planning for me was one of the biggest things. So now, at this point, the only drawback for me on the surface is one-pedal driving. And the price, okay, here's the price is completely loaded after destination, under $50,000.
I liked what I saw with the Woodland. I mean, that's a great form factor. That actually looks like the original Volvo cross-country wagon.
Yeah, and or with the Subaru partnership, it's literally an electric Outback.
Yep, exactly.
So, Tony, what are your thoughts on any of these? Is there any way you could ever buy an electric Toyota, or is this ridiculous?
I used to like Toyotas. No, I don't think I would. I look at all the EVs, just to see what they are. But I've had my heart set since R1, but I just couldn't put it in the garage for 2 reasons. 1, size, 2, price. Now I'm at the point where I could put something called a Rivian in my garage.
I've called Rivian 35 times. I'm like, hey, what's the cheapest way we can get this R1 in my garage? How do we get this R1S? And, they're like, hey, we can get you down to a $659 a month payment. I'm like, fantastic. How do we do it? They're like, all we need is a $20,000 down. I'm like, never mind. So, yeah, I feel you, Tony. I totally feel you. Brian, I want to talk about the charging experience for R2. Was the 400-volt architecture a miss?
No. And let me come back to that for just a second. There's no way I'm buying a Toyota, given their track record of working against EV adoption, right? They've always had the ability to do this, right? But they've actively worked against it, not passively, actively, right? So I'll descend the soapbox as it relates to that. There's no way I would buy a Toyota for that reason. The reason I say it's not a miss is because I think, having lived with EVs now for 13 years, whether it's 20 minutes or 26 minutes, usually the car is done charging before I'm ready to go. And it's not going to make that big of a difference. Plus, with the infrastructure that's out there, and we're in a great spot in terms of infrastructure. Adam, you talked about it earlier in terms of the amount of distance between DC fast charging across the country. The infrastructure is in a great position. It's not necessarily in as great a position when we start talking about 800 volt and 900 volt in the case of my Lucid vehicles. We're still maxing out with that Lucid Air at 250 kilowatt. So don't get me wrong. I love having that option, but I just don't think it's enough to be a deal breaker at this point. There's so much more in value with the R2, and 10 to 80% in under 30 minutes, between 30 and 25, that's good enough.
Tony?
Yeah, I think it's more of a trade-off that they did, whether it was a good trade-off or not. But to Brian's point is, it's not that we're just accepting, it's the slower charge. I think I saw 240 kilowatts is what CarWow showed at one point. Now, how long does it hold that? We don't know. But even so, I go to that Wawa, I come out, and I have 5 or 10 minutes. I have a feeling that with the Rivian R2, I'm going to come out, I'm going to be like getting idle fee if I don't get out there fast enough. But of course I'll look on my app. They could have done the 800, but what can accept it? Not many.
So I think it's a win. I think 400 volt architecture is a 100% win for two reasons. Number one, cost. All 800 volt components are insanely expensive, and Rivian will come out of this with a profitable vehicle. Volvo, I don't know. BMW, maybe, but I don't think Volvo is going to profit, especially the first year on this EX60. I think they threw the kitchen sink at it, including that, I don't know, dorsal fin they've got for a door handle. And, they got to market it somehow. Honestly, I think BMW may be profitable, but I know Rivian will be, and I don't think Volvo will be. And that's because they went 800 volt. They had people in there ticking boxes, but that's number one reason is cost. 800 volt architecture equipment is harder to get, less suppliers for competition, and just not as accessible. And then the other one is if you have a 400 volt architecture, you have a uniform experience. You pull into an Iona, it's 30 minutes. You pull into an Electrify America, it's 30 minutes. You pull into an EVGO, it's 30 minutes, because all of them can do exactly what Rivian's going to ask. And Tony, you mentioned it as well. How long is it going to hold that 240? Well, we know, because Teslas are 10 to 80 in 30 minutes, essentially. And what they do is they skyrocket to 250. They sit there for a little tiny bit, and they just do this. They just taper off. And that's exactly what this thing's going to do. I mean, it may not be the exact same curve, but you're looking at really fast for not a very long period of time. And then somewhere around 110, 120 kilowatts is what you're going to get up until somewhere near 80. And that's how you get a 30-minute curve. We've all been driving EVs long enough, Brian especially. I know Brian's seen 100 different charge curves, and that's just what they do. Brian, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think the uniform experience may be what they went for?
No, I think they went for cost reduction, right?
Okay.
Profitability is king for Rivian. They've got to get to scale with the R2, and it's right there in front of them. The perception right now in the marketplace is we can't wait for this vehicle. We'll see how things go in a few weeks when we see pricing and specs and different models, trims. It needs to Doug DeMuro's point, it needs to be a compelling number, because that's also going to drive additional pent-up demand for people that, like Tony, may be at the back of the line right now, with an opportunity for them to move up.
Okay. Tony, what are you walking away with from this discussion?
I'm still sold on the Rivian R2. Based on everything I've seen, just the research I've done, I think I've done more research on this than I've done even on the Fisker. I mean, because we couldn't get anything on the Fisker. At least we
it
have
was just
something.
a fight. Yeah.
So, Tony, let me play devil's advocate with you for a moment before you go. You got the Volvo. You didn't like the cross country. So let's just say that the Volvo EX60 P10, right? And you've got the Rivian R2 Launch Edition. They're both $65K. The P10 is going to offer you, let's say, 360 miles of range, 350 miles of range, whereas the Rivian R2 is going to offer you, let's say, 315, right? So a meaningful difference there in terms of range. They're the same price. The Volvo will get from 10 to 80 in 20 minutes, right? With 300 plus kilowatt charging, 400 kilowatt charging. Whereas with the Rivian, you're looking at closer to 30 minutes. You got the shark fin handles. And then I don't know how you feel about those, but you get where I'm going with the differences here. But the price is the same. Right? And then from a performance standpoint, maybe the Rivian's a little bit quicker.
Right.
Maybe 0.3, 0.4 seconds quicker is about all there's going to be in terms of difference there. Which way are you going? You still sticking with the R2?
I am still sticking with the R2. I kind of stand by that. And a lot of it is, I like the boxy. I mean, yes, the Volvo has a certain boxy, but that's more, to me, it looks more wagon than it does what the R2 does, right? The R2 is more of that, as they keep saying, the 4Runner and the RAV4 and all those types of things. I like that. I have higher ground clearance. I'm
There it
okay.
is.
Yeah. I've got the ground
There it
clearance
is.
and I can, not that do I go off road? No, but can I? Yes, I can.
Okay, what about service? Right?
Great
Remember
point.
what happened with Tesla
Yep.
service when they really started to ramp up scale with the Model 3 and then the Model Y, right? Service kind of went in the tank in terms of people not able to get to it. And when they do, the quality is,
Right. Well, and I know that their service is not where it should be. And I know that, but I believe enough in this tech forward and what they have that I think they're doing everything what they should be doing, at least in my opinion, as a consumer. So that's why I'd still even behind them now, because I'll drive that hour. I know that mine's in Malvern, right? I know where that one is. Okay, I got to drive an hour. Hopefully that's not very often.
Yeah, Brian's Rivian Service Center and mine are the same. If I were to go with it,
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting.
no,
I got two of them. So literally in opposite directions. I can go to Glen Burnie or I can go to Gaithersburg
Right.
inside of a half hour. So really fortunate,
To be in between them.
So I've got 4.5 or 5. That would be I've got a 4.5 hour or a 5 hour on
That's
the
your
R2.
only choice.
But I
Mine's
will
an
say-
hour.
I will say to Brian's question, and I know I'm not in the market for a car. My wife could replace 2 of our cars with an R2. We have that Subaru because literally of ground clearance. I would never choose a Subaru Solterra, knowing as much as I know about EVs, except that it's the only one I can afford with this much ground clearance. And also no CV axle issues, and I'd already owned a Prologue. I can't tell you, Brian, we have a story about this we can talk about later, but the small battery, the smaller the battery, the more nimble these cars are. It makes so much difference. I would take less range overnight, but either way, the R2, we can get rid of the Subaru, we can get rid of the Tesla. I have more ground clearance than both at that point. I saw a Facebook post in a forum, guy with a Blazer SS just like mine said, man, I'd love to have another inch of ground clearance, then I can get through some of this snow. I felt that during January and February. 9 inches is what I would require to just not have to worry about it anymore. And so my R2 would be what is the cheapest one that has a dual motor, obviously. And, I am a cheapskate, as we all know. But
That's okay. You bring in the difference of what we are.
Brian said it earlier. I
Yep.
I can always come with the opposite point of view, and 99% of the time it is actually how I feel. So
well, we're all on the same page in terms of excitement for R2.
Absolutely.
it tells
And
the whole story. If you're Rivian and you said this before, I'm like, well, hey, is it the commonality of experience? Is this uniform charging experience? Brian's like, no, profitability, right? If you're Rivian and you're like, we can profit a whole bunch more if we just mark these up 6,000. I think year one, as long as it's under 70, they are going to fly out the door. There's going to be a massive line. They're going to be flipped. They'll be flipped everywhere. I promise. There just won't be enough. The tubers are going to be clamoring for them. I got to get my hands on one. They're going to try to set the records for the cannonball with it. They're going to tear them apart. They're going to build other EVs with them. I think they're going to build gas versions of them, just like they did with the Model S. Tony, anything to add? I can't thank you enough for coming on here and sharing kind of your shopping experience and your perspective.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. The one thing I would add is what I remember hearing was around for this year into next year was around 20,000 of the R2 is about that's where my whole comment about being 68,600 or 999. Unless Brian's nice enough to let me bump up in front of him. So, but I appreciate it. I always love talking and seeing you guys. Look forward to, maybe meeting and doing this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Tony, I appreciate you. Brian, anything to add before he cuts out for the rest of the podcast?
No, I tried to move him off his spot, and it didn't happen. So he is committed to the R2.
Yes.
I can't say I blame you.
Nope. And I look forward, and I love watching Jose's stuff for what he's doing on software, because I just saw that. And it looks like you guys got the Apple Watch now.
Yeah, I just put a post up on that. I'm so frustrated with Rivian because I want my damn text messaging to work. integrated into the vehicle. They've been talking about this for over 2 years now.
Yeah.
And we still don't have text message integration. So
Well-
I see it as a safety concern,
Right.
a huge frustration, but because it's such a great vehicle,
It's coming with R2.
it's just,
And it'll
typing.
fall
Just get it
down.
done.
Exactly.
I'll believe that you can change the time of your meeting with their AI as soon as you get the text message feature.
That's all part of it, I think. That's my
I think it'll be part of this huge release post R2.
Yep. That's what I'm with you on that, Brian. I think that's going to be just huge. So,
Well, Tony, thanks again.
Yes.
Well, we will share more of your story as it unfolds, and I can't wait.
thank you and see you guys later.
All right. Thanks again, Tony. See you
Take
next
care.
time.
Bye.
Okay. Brian, the R2 is as real as it gets, and Tony is the proof. Are you thinking about, I know you said you talked to the wife about maybe getting her a car, because the original car was the Ocean for her, was it not?
It was. The Ocean was supposed to be her car. She picked it out and loved everything about it, until they didn't deliver.
So I'll swing that same question to you. Volvo, P10, or P12, and the cross country. Does the nostalgia for the cross country tilt you in the direction of it instead of the R2, or you just not need two Rivians?
No, we're keeping an open mind. As we've talked about before, we're over being first in line, right? Being the early adopters. If the R2 is that compelling, or the cross country EX60 is that compelling, maybe we'll look to grab one of those once they make it onto the secondary market. Plus, we're also going to be looking at what else is in the secondary market, right? Wifey's use case is very different. She might occasionally do the Cape Cod trip, but most of it is just going to be daily commuting. And so get the right tool for that job. And to your point, if we can get something with a smaller battery in the secondary market, which I think is going to go crazy here as more and more vehicles are coming off lease, right? We'll probably just do that because we've got at least 2 other vehicles that we can use for, the long trip use case.
Yeah, there'll be 30,000 Prologues and Blazers coming off of lease this year. And that's just one example. There are so many leases that were 2-year. Those 2-year tax credit leases started at the beginning of 24. So, it was like March kind of when they figured out all the rules. So, expect a big jump, and really starting in March. If you're looking at the secondary market at a $30,000 price point, is there anything you could think of off the top of your head that might just be an excellent answer for somebody?
So I just went to a dealership Monday of this week. They had a couple of Hyundais on the lot. They had the Ioniq 6. I think that's a vehicle that gets overlooked way too often. It's got super fast charging. It's got ridiculous range. Hyundai knows what they're doing in terms of fit, finish, build quality, and so on. So that's one. The EV9 is another one. Kia EV9 is another one that I saw on the lot there. Big 3-row SUV. And I think that some of the lower trims are going to be right in that $30,000 range within 6 months.
Yeah, for me, it's a Lyriq. A ton of options where it comes to the Cadillac Lyriq, right around 30,000.
Already.
Oh yeah, right now. Yeah, every trim, luxury. But yeah, there are multiple. I had one dealership, they had 4 different Lyriqs, all priced at $29,995. It's a 102 kilowatt hour battery, right around 300 miles of range.
Those probably do have CarPlay and Android Auto.
The older ones, yeah, the $20,000 ones would, yeah.
The older Lyriqs actually had that in there before they took it out, I think, last year.
I like the GM software. Obviously, as soon as the R2 stats started coming out, I'm standing them up right beside my SS. Like, okay, what is really it? And, ground clearance, because the GM software is so good. I'm not saying it's Rivian good, but, feature for feature, it's fairly comparable. My text messages work, for example. But I think that ground clearance is a big one for them, but otherwise I've got 300 miles of range. I've got 0 to 60 in 3.4. I've got a little bit slower charging. Now, what I have noticed about resale on the SS is I have not lost as much money as I thought I would. You want to take a guess? I paid $58,111 out the door for that thing. What do you think the private party sale is on that right now?
Private party sale a year in.
Yeah, yes, it's a model year, but yeah.
I don't know, somewhere between 45 and 48.
It's almost right at 45. That's not EV depreciation. That's like regular car depreciation. You buy a $58,000 car, you lose about 10 and change the first year. So I was satisfied with that. The next thing we should probably talk about is your hat. Talk to me. You hosted an Iona event. I would love to dig into what that experience was like.
Yeah, I'm sorry you weren't able to be there, but completely understand why you weren't. As I was leaving the house and taking some back roads to get onto the major highway to get there, I was concerned about the conditions, right? Because it had snowed that night and temperatures were in low single digits, and the feels like or wind chill temperatures were negative double digits, right? So it was brutal with a fair amount of wind, which would make it feel much colder. But we had folks turn out, man. We've got some hardcore EV fans in the Maryland Bolt group. The Maryland Tesla Owners Association was there. So we had a great turnout. We have 3 Iona sites in Maryland. And with this group, we decided to host 2 of them, right? We did the Middletown first at 11 a.m. And then we did the Gaithersburg one at 2 p.m. And it worked out really well. I'm really surprised, firstly, that Iona's been around for 2 years already, right? That seemed to have come pretty quickly. They've got a triple-digit number of sites that are active currently, and they're not gouging people on pricing, right?
Yeah, that is my favorite. That's my favorite part so far. Now, it could change or they could keep it that way, but prices are in the 30s.
Yeah, that's unheard of, right? When Rivian launched pay for charging at Rivian Adventure Network sites, it was 36 cents a kilowatt hour, but that didn't last. And it went from that to
63.
50s and 60s a kilowatt hour. So hopefully that's not going to happen with Iona, but all of the ones I've been to have at least 10 plugs. They have a combination of CCS and NACS, right? So and the pricing is great. And the experience is you get up there, you plug in. Some platforms have plug and charge. If you don't, you just swipe your card and you're good to go. They've got trash, recycling, doggy bags, as well as windshield washers right there at the sites. One of those 2 in Middletown actually has a canopy that's set up for solar. The other one in Gaithersburg doesn't have a canopy, but they've typically been adding canopies later. So hopefully they'll do that.
GM owners get a discount. If it's an urban area, which most Ionas are, it's going to be the lowest price. Now, in places where it's not, I have paid as high as 48 cents a kilowatt hour at an Iona, and that was Maslin, Ohio. And it is at a Sheetz in the middle of nowhere. There is no canopy. It's just like a Tesla supercharger would be. Except I think there's 10 stalls. It's a really good experience. I feel confident when I drive into that place that I'm going to be able to plug in and go. And of course, plug and charge with GM. I feel like that is a terribly underutilized feature that charging networks really should be doing a better job with. I know EVgo does that, but it's like their own, Auto Charge Plus. Electrify America has a very, very pick and choose kind of style there. I believe they have expanded some though. My only beef is that they won't put one where I live. And I will say that if you look on the Iona website, their goal is to put chargers in high volume travel areas, so major interstates and urban areas.
So I know we've had this conversation before, but I'll bring it up again. If Iona, I guess Tesla is the one exception, but EVgo, Electrify America, Mercedes, you name it, are not putting charging in West Virginia. Is that a CPO issue or is that a West Virginia issue?
But my question is, what is required to put these things in that is preventing them? Tesla has no problem putting them in. There are Sheetz here that have them. There are hotels here that have them. There are gas stations here. There's a gas station in Sutton that has a Tesla supercharger, but unfortunately, it's a V3, but it's not a open to everybody V3. It is one of those only open to Tesla V3 units. I've charged there. I had a Model Y. I love going there because it was empty. It was all of them are empty. You go to West Virginia, other than the superchargers, Most of them don't have a lot of people there. But West Virginia borders 5 states. We are a central thoroughfare, and I know we're mountainous and everything, but whether or not you live here, or even if you stop here, you travel through here. And by Iona choosing not to, EVgo does have right now one charger. It's at a pilot. It's in the middle of the state. It's right where it's supposed to be. It makes driving south doable for basically anyone. And so, kudos to them. It's actually less than 500 feet away from that supercharger I was talking about. But there is a plaza in Clarksburg, West Virginia that crosses I-79 with US Route 50. US Route 50 goes coast to coast, and it is the busiest intersection in West Virginia. And Chenoweth Ford is 2 miles away, and they have 2 of those Red E 120 kilowatt Autels, and that's it. But this plaza has, you name a restaurant, they have it. It's like a mall. They have an enterprise rent-a-car. There's 2 grocery stores. There are 15 different restaurants. It's the entire shopping experience for anyone. And any given day, the post office annex is there. Like, it is a 25 to 50,000 people a day location, centrally located in the state on 2 major thoroughfares, and there's no place to charge. Iona should get in contact with them and, put them in. And the other thing is, Iona makes it that easy. On their website, it says host a rechargery. If you're interested, all you have to do is go to their website and type it in. So if you're a small business owner in West Virginia, reach out.
Hopefully we'll see that change. I'm really excited about what's happening in terms of DC fast charging infrastructure. I just wish I could get out and drive my Lucid Air, because that has become what I'm calling a garage ornament over the last 7+ weeks now. I literally haven't been able to drive that car for 7 weeks. It all comes down to the fact that they delivered the vehicle with summer performance tires, and I wasn't paying close enough attention to realize that that was the case. So I did a little bit of digging and found out that summer performance tires are made of a compound that's intended for use above 45 degrees. It just creates a situation where its intended use is to be sticky so that you can put down that power. But in these temperatures that we've had in what's been a pretty rough winter, it introduces a condition called the glass transition effect, which in essence, you're losing 50% of your stopping distance. Right, that's a huge amount. And there's also something called cold cracking that can permanently damage the tires. So I got no choice. I got to leave it in the garage as an ornament until temperatures rise.
Yeah, I learned that lesson the hard way myself. I bought a Civic Si in 2006 and had no idea it came with summer tires. Lost control a couple times. I was in my 20s. I like to learn things the hard way back then. So, there were a couple of those instances, but you're smart to leave it in the garage. And I'm sorry to hear that. I did take a big road trip in January, right before the big storm. I left on the 1st at like 11 p.m. and we got back on the 4th. We went to Charleston, South Carolina. It was fantastic. I've got a whole video coming out on the channel, and it's kind of my empirical.
Was that in the Blazer?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Can't take the Subaru. It has 4 DC fast chargers per day maximum.
What type of tires are on the SS? Are those all suit?
Yeah. There are 2 options that come with the Blazer. They are the same size. I believe they are 275 40/22, and they're both summer. Or they're both the same size, but one is summer, one is all season. The all season is the only thing available in this entire part of the country. They don't even send any of the summer ones this way.
I don't understand why Lucid didn't do that, right? For this part of the country, there's no reason to send summer performance tires unless the customer requests it, right? And there's such a thing as a high performance all season that they could put on there.
Oh yeah, with a 70,000 mile warranty. Yeah, sold tires. There are some pretty high quality all season options. With all that we've learned about Lucid from the period of time when you bought your car, they didn't have the hardware for the Driver Plus.
Right.
I think that it was good that they were selling cars. They were doing the right thing. They were discounting the cars. They were moving the units. We've driven the Gravity. That video is available as a collaboration from both of us, and I like the direction they're going. You're right, though. They should should be careful about where those summer tires end up.
Yeah, with all the conversation we had about the R2, we didn't mention the fact that Lucid is supposed to be unveiling their R2 equivalent. Earth, I think, is the name on the streets right now, right? That's supposed to be unveiled at some point this year. So if they can get into the mix, then, like I said, that's a segment that's going to be hyper competitive.
The more competitive, the better. I hope it brings the prices down. I have two thoughts on price. I think new car prices, period, are too much, but in a technological transition like we're having, where you have two different powertrains and one's fighting to stay alive, and one is obviously being adopted at an exponential curve globally, there's going to be a lot of cost changes. But I do think the used market this year is just unbelievable. New study is out. 90% is the average used vehicles available range from initial, which is way higher than expected. EVs with over 100,000 miles are still in the upper 80s as far as their battery capacity on average. So there is empirical data now. So if you think that EVs lose range over time, there is empirical data now to prove that that's not necessarily true. I know you had an experience with your Model 3 where it looked like it was like a shell of the car it used to be range-wise, and then a little bit of a charging trick, and it was right back to where it was.
Yeah, they recalibrated the battery, and now it's right in that upper 80% range that you just referenced. I actually got a text from Khalil, right? Our former Fisker Ocean 1 buddy, who's in a Polestar 3. And he had a similar experience where, he was topping out at about 190 miles of range on that 300 plus range vehicle, granted in cold weather, but he just had a software update that put him back into, 200 plus.
And I know Tom Malogny just, he had his Equinox shut down on him, and he had to have it towed away. And turns out that was a software update too. And they did a software update, and it was back on the road in a couple days.
Yeah, there's something interesting going on there. I think I had mentioned to you that with our Rivian R1T a few weeks ago, when it was super cold, we were driving before the big snowstorm to Costco, and we had a battery fault show up in the vehicle, and it lost all throttle response, right? And it started to reduce power. So it went from about 65, which we were driving, down to 45. Which is kind of dangerous on a high-speed highway. And that turned out to be a software reset, right? And it happened twice within the same week. So I actually have an appointment next week to take it in, just so they can run a diagnostic. It hasn't come up again since. And that was almost 3-4 weeks ago that it happened. But I'm curious to see what they say. Especially after watching Tom's experience with the Equinox TV.
Yeah, cold temperatures are tough. I think that'll be an ongoing challenge. What we don't talk about is how poorly gas cars perform in the cold as well. I'm sure you've owned enough gas cars to know that when those temperatures get that bad, you might not start. It might have difficulty starting. You got to let them sit there and run and burn $1 worth of gas just to get them up to temperature. And so cold is always going to be an issue. And I'm definitely excited to see what your results are with that. I'll keep an eye on your channel. Make sure you subscribe also to Brian's channel so you don't miss any of those updates. We should probably talk about Ford. What are your thoughts from this, platform update, I guess we should call it? A lot of people are taking a lot of stock in this. As you can probably guess, I don't feel that way. What are your thoughts?
I'm very disappointed in Ford, and I have been for a while. And it's good to see that there's ongoing investment there, but it almost feels like they're trying to be partially pregnant.
Okay.
Which isn't a thing.
Well,
Right.
I mean, so their strategy, and they've divulged this over and over again. If you listen to one earnings call, it's literally just littered with this same sentiment, is that we would rather build less volume and higher price, and then you're going to build a $30,000 high volume EV. Where does that fit into your strategy as a brand, number one? And number two, it sounds to me like this unveil is just like a combination between Tesla Battery Day and the original Model 3 unveil, like 2017, which, if we're doing the math, is like 10 years ago almost. They're like, hey, if we make it slippery, it'll get better range. And, we should make the battery as structural as possible. I know, and the engineer, to give him credit, is a Tesla guy. And, Tesla taught the whole industry how to do this, but to brag about it and say, and maybe it wasn't
like it's some sort of innovation from Ford's Skunk Works project in Silicon Valley. It just seemed really disingenuous to me, right? We know who started with the molds and the presses versus hundreds of different parts, right? Yeah, you've gotten it down to 3 parts. Wonderful. Where'd you get that idea? Right? None of that stuff is new. So yeah, I don't know where they're going with this. It could be really compelling if they can hit that $30,000 price mark, but you know how this is, right? We just talked about it with Rivian's $45,000 price point, where it's marketing to your point, but the reality when that comes out, I think will be very different.
I think a starting price is a starting price. They're hard to get. They're impossible to find. They're only going to be in California. They're only going to build them for fleets. That's what cars cost now. Cars cost $45,000 for what you need, and then anything else you want costs more. That's the workings of it. In fact, let's squeeze this in really quickly. There is a new version of the Model Y. I don't know if you saw it. It's like $42,000. It's called the Model Y all-wheel drive, which is the Model Y standard, but with dual motor. Does this change anything for Tesla?
No. Tesla's got bigger issues. I think that the company now has, as it relates to their vehicles, it's got an artificial ceiling that's not going away, all right, based on leadership. So
period.
I don't think that exactly. That's not changing, and it has global impact.
Yeah, Europe especially. All you have to do is look at Europe's numbers, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. It's like you said. You did take a test drive that I'm interested if you'd like to share on this specific video. I told you a while ago, I loved my Subaru when I first got it, and it sounded like your brain was being scrambled. How could you possibly love this 227 miles of range, super limited, kind of backwards as far as, software direction type of vehicle? And then you went and took a test drive, and then I could explain it to you again, and I think maybe it made more sense. Care to spill the beans there?
Yeah, so let's talk about why, because I went to test drive the Sierra EV, right? The GMC Sierra EV pickup truck. Now, why would I do that when I just said earlier in this podcast that the Rivian R1T is the best EV, we've owned across, 10 EVs and 6 brands? Well, felt like we needed more space in the second row. Last month, we had to take our daughter back to college. So that's almost 450-mile trip to Massachusetts. So it's me, it's wifey, it's our daughter, and the dog. And that second row was pretty cramped, right? The dog was behind me, and my 6'6" frame with the seat almost all the way back, and my daughter sat behind wifey in the second row. So that was the first reason. I felt like we needed more space. Plus, we have her camper, and we want to be able to take that camper out more and do more towing trips with it. So I'm thinking, let me go look at one of these big battery EVs, and man, I don't think I want any part of it anymore. It looked like I expected it to look, like I've seen in the videos, but that thing is huge. It is ginormous. It is an absolute boat. It's 16 inches longer than the R1T and over 2,000 pounds more heavy. So, and it feels every bit of that. So it's not nimble. It is less maneuverable. It is much slower and a lot less fun to drive, right? So those were my initial takeaways. And then the more that I looked at it, I opened up that frunk, and I didn't know this, but the frunk is the same qubit footage as the Rivian, but it's a lot less usable based on the shape of it, right? If you're going to use that, you're going to have stuff flying around unless you get some sort of a net or tie down. Whereas with the Rivian's two-stage front trunk, you got a lot more storage options there that's a lot more usable. And the other thing I noticed was the gear tunnel, which obviously is a unique feature of the Rivian. It just makes that vehicle so much more usable and utilitarian, right? I use that for my golf clubs. My golf clubs could not fit in the front trunk of the Sierra. So that, along with everything else, would have to go in the bed. The Rivian also has this ginormous space under the bed, right? If you don't get the full-size spare that you can use. So just overall, I'm glad I did it, but it confirmed that I was making a mistake going down that path.
The Subaru is a little bit narrower and a little bit shorter, but it feels half the size because it has a smaller battery pack than the Blazer. And the Blazer, I love it. I love the way it drives, but I recognize that this is a large vehicle that is going to drive large and feel large. And, the Blazer, obviously, both my vehicles are absent of frunk. But for you, some of the other things, towing was a thing, and then you said back seat size was a thing, and it wasn't worth and this is the analogy I said, is that the Rivian R1T is an efficient off-road EV that happens to be a truck. The Sierra EV is a truck that happens to be an EV. And I think that...
Great analogy.
And I think that you learned that, a 200 kilowatt hours of battery will change the driving dynamics a little bit. You're going to get a little bit of a change. What else did you want to address?
Let me add one thing quickly to that, because what you're talking about is what we talked about earlier around use case and the right tool for the job. The multi-pro tailgate that those vehicles have is super cool. It's a great feature, but just like that second row room that I talked about and the towing, both of those things we do less than 5 times a year, right?
There you go.
That multi-pro midgate would probably get used once or twice a year, right?
Okay.
So why would I take our beloved Rivian R1T, give it in as a trade-in, and then pay another 20, 30K maybe to get one of those?
Here's another fun tidbit for the audience. You did, because of this, check a couple of different things, insurance and resale value on the R1T. Can you care to share any of that?
Yeah, the insurance cost I thought would be a little bit less. And you and I talked about this, right? We thought it would be a little bit less for the GM because, like you said, it's a truck that happens to be an EV, right? But no, my insurance estimate from Allstate was about $200 more biannually, right? So
Okay.
it would be $400 more to insure the Sierra EV.
Or $40 a month or so.
Exactly. And the residual value on our R1T, that was my first time really looking at that. Their trade-in value would be around 45. And I think the private party sale is, you had mentioned, was a little bit closer to 48, 49, somewhere in there.
The 1-year-old Blazer and a 2-year-old Rivian are right in that 45. If you're looking at all these vehicles, a $45,000 completely stripped down 2-wheel drive R2 versus a couple-year-old, well-maintained, completely up-to-date R1T with a quad motor. Is there any argument for the R2 there?
Not everybody's got a big enough garage into which the R1T can fit, but I think that's about it. Either that or the maneuverability of it. The R1T is significantly bigger than the R2. So if you live in an urban environment where, you're parallel parking and you're moving around the city, a smaller vehicle would make sense. Other than that, nope.
I'm with you. In fact, I'm proud of you for thinking of one reason, period. I just think for the money, these Rivians, when they start to go under 50, they start to get very, very reasonable as far as a cost. And if I were looking for a Rivian R2 right now, I would definitely cross shop both of the R1 series in the event. Like you said, the size would make sense for you. I'm so glad we got to talk about all this stuff. I disappeared for 6 weeks to explore the donut battery. I don't know if you had a chance to catch any of that. I don't blame you if you didn't. It's an hour and 25-minute video. What are your thoughts on solid state batteries or anything in that realm?
Yeah, I watch every video that you publish. I know that solid state is the future, right, for EVs. But, that future, we just don't know where it's going to land, right? Whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now, in terms of being able to scale that technology for any sort of mass EV production.
In my opinion, the solid state battery is as significant a step change as gas to EV as far as technology and what's required and manufacturing and scale. I did not feel that way going in. I was like, oh yeah, solid state, no big deal. But it's so different. And there are so many challenges. And that's what made, I feel like the research worth it. But man, I don't think any other month, had I not been locked into my house with, 0-degree temperatures, I never would have been able to knock out that kind of an experience. But I agree with you that, counting on it soon, maybe too soon. Is solid state required for mass adoption? How about that?
Is it?
No, I don't think. I mean, 300 miles of range. I think 300 miles of range is the sweet spot for EVs. I think that we should go cheaper as far as material and greener as far as material before we go, higher energy density, 400 miles of range.
Well, maybe you're answering the question with that response, but that's where I was going to go next, right? So what's the value proposition with solid state, right? When do you think we'll actually see it? And when we do, what's in it for the consumer? What's in it for that manufacturer, right? That gets to be the first mover on it.
I don't think that there's anything in it for the consumer. That sounds bad. But so you pay more for more range, right?
Yeah.
No matter what, I don't care how much it costs you to get whatever you made to get me more range. You can charge me for more range. So that's never going to be a thing. If you have an EV with 500 miles of range and an EV with 300 miles of range, they are going to be significantly different in price, regardless of what these things cost. And the other thing is the cost is astronomically high. The manufacturing is not understood at this point, unless this donut company is telling the truth, which, come on, man. Does this not smell like Fisker to you all over again?
It smells for sure.
Yeah. So, in the event they're telling the truth, it still is going to be rare. It's going to be hard to find. It's going to be impossible to manufacture. And scale is 10 years away in the best case scenario. For me, it's 30 years away. We solved nuclear fusion. You know that, right? They were able to solve nuclear fusion in a lab. They zapped it with, a jillion gigawatts of energy, to be precise, obviously. And then, it was a jillion gigawatts plus one that came back out, and they were able to maintain it for a super small amount of time. It's the same as hydrogen. All you need to scale hydrogen is $200 trillion to build all these infrastructures and all these new fueling stations. Hydrogen is the best fuel, sure, because it burns completely clean, but you have to make it, and that's expensive. And you have to make the things that make it, and that's expensive. And solid state is absolutely no different. You take a technology that's not quite there yet, and you just plug solid state in for whatever that name is, and all those challenges are there. So it's not ready yet, and when we get it, it'll just cost more. So lithium iron phosphate is cheaper, easier to scale. Sodium eventually will find a way to be cheaper because raw material cost, over time. But for right now, we have a very mature lithium supply chain. Let's use it while it's there. Let's figure out how to recycle it. And then we can but I would go for sodium before I went for solid state. But at the end of the day, companies are thinking about it differently for one reason, and that's shareholder wealth. If you say you make any breakthrough on solid state technology, whether it be, minuscule, and all of them are, you get a little tiny bump, right? GM, during the Tesla was scaling up and releasing the Model Y, GM just kept promising every car was going to be an EV by 2025. And their stock went right up with them. And it was those promises. And it's the same thing with solid state. I believe that's why everybody's in the game. They want R&D money. They want shareholder value, and they want those articles published about them. And it's probably all I need to say about it.
Well, speculation.
Yeah, correct. Anything else to add, man? This was a great discussion.
Yeah, it really was. We will have to do this again next month once the pricing and specs and trim levels are unveiled for the R2.
I can't wait. I want to dive deep. I want to be able to compare. And it's, I think it's going to be a pretty good year for EVs, thanks to the Rivian R2 and, hopefully some of these moves from Toyota. Toyota has some brand loyalty that is completely unmatched. I think that there is brand loyalty with Toyota that is just, I probably impossible to communicate. And so if we can get some of those folks to convert, it's a win, regardless of how we might feel about, their actions in that EV space.
Yeah, more options in the market. It's an exciting time if you're in the market looking for an EV. The infrastructure is in a great spot to support it, and there are so many options both in terms of new and in the secondary market.
Yep. Hey, final question regarding that. An Ioniq 9, well-equipped, you're looking around 70,000. Probably 65 for the EV9, right? The average R1S sells for about 85, 90. Where does that Highlander fit in where it wins? Where you say, okay, wait a minute, this might be the best option value-wise?
I don't know that it does. I think the Highlander fits in more so from the standpoint of what you mentioned earlier, brand loyalty.
Okay.
The ICE Highlander, and it was the hybrid version of it that really took off like a wildfire, rock solid. It served those buyers extremely well for a long time. And so I can see a lot of those buyers going back and saying, okay, the hybrid was good. You've got an all-electric one. I'm going to give that one a try. So I think the brand loyalty more so than anything else is going to drive that. But it won't do any good for me.
I hear you. I think it has to beat the EV9 in price to be compelling, and I don't think it will. But, time will tell. Because, if you're selling the Woodland for 50 and the Highlander is only 60, I don't see that happening. I think it's more like a 65 to 70. And at that point, the Ioniq 9 looks better, is bigger, and probably a better overall performance as far as EV. So,
yeah, I think we got to get more people looking at Ioniq 9 and EV9. The amount of content and features that are in those vehicles it's surprising. They literally have, heated and ventilated or cooling seats in the second row in those vehicles as options. So
yes, customer satisfaction with the EV9 is some of the highest ever. So, it's like you said, it's just a monster in every way. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, the EVOG, and take a look at mine, Adam's Everything EV, for more. And obviously this devil's advocate style perspective. I guess I'm kind of becoming that guy in some ways. But Brian, it was a really good discussion. And let's look at these prices next time, see what happens.
That sounds like a plan, man. And who knows, we might have some other exciting news between now and then. We did get a little bit this week from Polestar, which we didn't get to, but we can unpack that a little more next month.
Sounds good. Something to look forward to. You guys subscribe for more. Brian, thanks again.
All right. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for joining.